Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattle, and welcome to another figure review. I did one of these a couple weeks ago and really quite enjoyed it, and I figured we'd do another one. Obviously a very different change of pace here. We of course have Spongebob SquarePants from Super 7. It's a show I've enjoyed for my entire life. It was really the first show I watched that wasn't, for preschoolers, so it means quite a lot to me. This figure was released in 2022, as we can see by the copyright data on his pants on the back. Let's get into it. So these glasses are removable. They're one of the many accessories that comes with this. Of course, this is a reference to mainly when he goes jellyfishing or when he's reading, things like that. There's a slight scuff. That is not a fault of the figure itself. I actually hit my shelf the other day, and this guy came tumbling down, which also resulted in this scuff mark here, which is a shame. But he is sort of a soft vinylish, well, not soft, but I'd say softer vinyl material than a lot of other figures. We'll set the glasses off to the side for now, and let's cover over the paint. So this is obviously based on pretty standard SpongeBob design. He's got his dimples. In terms of color scheme, it is very true to the actual artwork of SpongeBob. It does go for a more yellowish tone on his spots, which is actually accurate to the cell art throughout the series when it was cell-based. And of course, when it was digitally done in the more modern era, it is still very true to that color. This greenish color was mainly a result of a certain effect during digitizing the cells in Seasons 1 and a little bit of Season 2. So this is more based on how he actually looked rather than the effect of being digitized back in the late 90s. Of course, his paint detail, I'd say, is fairly standard. He's got his square pants. He's looking a little taller, which actually is a little closer to, I'd say, the middle season designs, where he was a bit more rectangular than full-on square. Sort of middle early design, but that's not a big deal. This is very generic SpongeBob. There's not too many hallmarks of a specific era to go off of, especially given the fact that it's just a generic color scheme. He does have this slightly slight curve to his back, and I'd say he's well painted the whole way around. Eyes are quite striking and bright, as they should be. Sleeves are actually in molded white, which isn't too big of a deal, just because, again, they're pretty far removed from this white, but there is a color difference there, so that is something to keep in mind. I've had this guy for a while, so he has been sitting on my shelf. Let's move on to posability, and unsurprisingly, given the fact that he is a cube with legs, it's not the most interesting. If we look at his arms, he has pretty standard sort of up and down. He can rotate and do that. His hands just have a swivel and a sort of hinge joint, if you will. It comes standard with these flat hands, 3-fingered, and a thumb, which makes perfect sense. And then if we look at his legs, they're just forward, back, a good amount, actually. I'm surprised because they gave him these deep cutouts, which they definitely needed to do. He can twist his legs there, and he can sort of crunch, if you will. You can see up there, that's the joint. He does actually have a whole second head, which we'll get into when we get to accessories. Though aside from that, he doesn't have too much articulation, which, again, is more so a limitation of the design than I think anything wrong with the figure itself. He looks like SpongeBob, and you can get him into a lot of SpongeBob poses. Not so much the impact frames we'd see, in episodes like, what is it, Bubble Fishing Stand? That's not the name of the episode, but you know the one I'm talking about. When he's showing Squidward the technique, obviously that would be very hard to replicate in a figure like this. So, as you can see, he can crunch forward a good amount, he can crunch back, or bend back a pretty good amount, and it doesn't really reveal any nasty joints or anything, so it's really not too bad. I also like the detail of his chin being picked out with this red line. I think the red on his tie is very well done. Overall, I think the figure looks quite nice. It just fits the sort of standard SpongeBob design very well. Let's move on to accessories. Obviously, we already covered the glasses, which just sit on his head. Okay, I'm making this one more difficult than it needs to be. They just sit on his head, pretty standard like that. Of course, this would be, again, mainly from jellyfishing when he wears these, which he does include the gear for, so it is good that they included his glasses, as they are an essential part of jellyfishing for any aspiring jellyfishers. I will say, these are not the highest quality. Granted, there's not much that needs to be done with this design. They're big-rimmed black glasses. I think they got the curved, sort of cartoonish style of lens down pretty well. But, it's just pretty standard. As you can see, slightly warped. That is, again, because I dropped this off my shelf like a fool. Not a fault of the figure itself. So, with the glasses out of the way, let's get into it. This guy has a lot of... That's a sword from a Warhammer Mini. Let's get into the accessories. Now, this guy has an obscene amount of accessories. SpongeBob, you're going to have to go over there for now. So, let's take this off. Of course, I think this box actually looks quite nice. It's hard to get... It's hard to get it fully in frame. You know what, let's just move SpongeBob off to the side for now. But it's a nice piece of SpongeBob artwork. It's done in a sort of almost watercolor styling. It doesn't come across great on camera, but it looks very nice in person. Definitely a box worth displaying. And then you take this slip cover off, or dust cover if you will, and you get the clamshell and everything like that. SpongeBob SquarePants, there it is in the sort of Super 7 styling. This is a Super 7 figure, of course. You've got a sort of character backstory here. Yep, he can usually be found grilling Krabby Patties at the Krusty Krab, the finest eating establishment ever established for eating. One of the world's most dedicated fry cook isn't at work. You'll find him at his pineapple house with his pet snail, Gary, or riding fishing hooks with his best pal, Patrick. Other times, you'll find him working alongside his sourpuss neighbor, Squidward, or practicing karate with his squirrely pal, Sandy Cheeks. No matter what he's up to, SpongeBob's eternally sunny outlook makes even the most ordinary day extraordinary. Pretty standard render of SpongeBob there. This has been used probably more times than there is observable atoms in the universe. So let me get this clamshell out. I'm going to pause while I do that because it's quite loud. Well, I was going to say we're back, but one of the accessories already fell out because this clamshell isn't super tight. See, it just kind of sits in there, and this is an odd accessory, if you will. It is, of course, his jellyfishing net. It has a true, like, actually mesh net here that I think adds a certain niceness to it. It's not just a big hunk of molded plastic. It's not going to do anything insane, but I think it's just sort of nice. Probably, honestly, it might be a cost-cutting measure, and also it makes it easier to pack, but I think this looks quite nice. This would, of course, be held by one of his various other hands, which we'll get to in a moment. Next up, we have a very important hand for any SpongeBob to have. This one's in there a little tighter because it is an arm and not just a big stick. Let me just push that out. Sorry. Here you can see the bubble-blowing arm. Let me move this aside. Now, the bubble-blowing arm, let me pull in the focus just a little bit. A little closer. There. Oh, wait, too close. Sorry, I'm getting used to manual mode on my phone. I think this looks quite nice. The yellow matches quite well. The arm's a little longer, which makes perfect sense. Pretty sure this just comes and is replaced fairly standard. But I really like the way the bubble came out. There's this slight sort of tunneling in the middle, which was probably more an artifact of printing, but I think it adds to the effect. And it does have a warping effect through the bubble itself. I think this looks quite nice. And it, of course, is meant to pair with his bubble-blowing face, because he is a bubble-blowing baby. We'll get into that in a moment. That covers everything on the front part of the clamshell, as you can see here. Let me pull the focus back in to a little closer to that range. And let's move on to the next set of accessories. We'll cover all the extra characters that this comes with, because it comes with quite a few, all things considered. And first up is another iconic SpongeBob character. I think given his more limited mobility, they decided to include a lot of extras in this regard. Here you have Gary the Snail, who was painted wonderfully. He's got a pretty passive look on his face. He doesn't look too grumpy like he usually does, but he looks quite cute, as he should, as he is very cute. I like the gloss finish on his shell, which it should be, and then the matte on the pattern, which is wonderfully realized here. This guy, again, he's just Gary. He looks exactly as you'd expect, and you have Gary's food bowl, which I quite like. It's something very simple, it's just, another piece. There is a slight glossiness to the food, which is nice. Snail Po, presumably. Written here, Gary, in that nice font. I think this looks great. It's just a really nice piece to include, to have really the whole SpongeBob family around, of course, ignoring Mrs. SquarePants and Mr. SquarePants, his parents, and also his Grandma SquarePants, but now we're getting a little getting a little off the track here. So this looks quite good. Gary, of course, hasn't had the most consistent size through the series, but this fits very well, I'd say. He's sometimes depicted as smaller than this, but I think this works perfectly fine. It lets them get all the details in quite nice. And it just fits Gary's design quite well, as does SpongeBob. So we'll keep Gary off to the side. And now that we don't have that big clamshell, let's just line everyone up. There is quite a lot in here. We're still not done. We have another fan-favorite character from a fan-favorite episode. We have Bubble Buddy. Bubble Buddy, of course, being SpongeBob's wisecracking bubble friend who takes hours in the bathroom and pays with bubble money. He's done up in sort of clear plastic. There really isn't much to say about Bubble Buddy. He is just one piece. He does have flat feet, so he can stand somewhat well. I think there may be some mold lines there, and this desk is not the most even, so that definitely doesn't help the situation. But see, he's not leaning on anything. He can stand just fine, and he's Bubble Buddy. So if you wanted to pose SpongeBob with Bubble Buddy, that's completely reasonable. And of course, Bubble Buddy is an iconic character from one of the fan favorite episodes, Bubble Buddy. Yeah, Bubble Buddy looks good. He's a nice include, nice and simple, and gives you pretty much a 3-pack, if you will. And then on to the next, we have, of course, SpongeBob's second head. Or actually, no, you know what? We'll cover this first. This is nice and simple. There is one more little critter from Bikini Bottom included in this kit, and that is a jellyfish. This is, again, pretty well done. It's got the 3 spots you'd expect from a jellyfish. Pretty much only presentable from this side, as it's just smooth on the other, which does match some jellyfish, but most have these 3 spots. And he's got his tentacles. He floats around, probably a little on the small side, but that's not a big deal. And you can catch him with your jellyfishing net. Very nice. Now let's pop him out and put him here. He actually can stand. And then you have SpongeBob's second head, which is far more expressive. It's him blowing a bubble, of course. Aside from that, the paint and everything, very much the same, just the expression is different. They got the holes right and everything. Big puffed out cheeks, very nice, very expressive, something rather unusual, I'd imagine, on most people's shelves. And I believe this is pretty easy to replace. We'll do that in a moment. And then we have the full suite of extra SpongeBob hands and arms, which first we start off with is one that complements the first arm we looked at. If I can get it out. Really, had to pop that one out. That was not easy. We have his bubbles. They look quite accurate. The purple is perhaps a little bit too similar to the pink. Maybe should have been a little bit more definition there, but not the end of the world. A little bit of spillover of paint, but I suppose that is the way of things, or paint not covering enough. I think this still looks quite good. Definitely wouldn't be the focal point of the figure, though. And then you have his grabbing hands, if you will. This is, of course, for holding his jellyfishing net. He is ambidextrous, as we all know. SpongeBob is ambidextrous, so including both makes perfect sense. And I believe this is pretty standard. You would just sort of slide this in. Perhaps I haven't done this myself, so this is a bit of a learning experience. But yep, just like that. And there you go. You have your jellyfishing arm. Same sort of twist. The jellyfish net you'd probably want to hold higher up just because it's a little on the heavy side. So let's put it more like maybe at the second rung. Yeah, that makes it a little less wobbly. And then if you throw in the jellyfish, you have him, well, catching a jellyfish. And you could also have him like this after he's just caught something, perhaps displaying it. Let's try and replace one of these arms. I believe it's just as simple as pulling out. Maybe not. That is one thing that I did not see, if this includes an instruction manual, which I don't think it does, which is certainly a bit of a knock against it, because, well, it's useful when you've got a figure that's unorthodox to have a way to see exactly how it goes. If we look at this here, we see it is just a pretty standard joint. I'm probably just not pulling quite hard enough. I don't want to break this figure, but, we must do what we must do for the video. And maybe this doesn't come off. Maybe these arms are just meant to be like that. Though I don't think that makes the most sense. I'm certain there's a way to get this out. You might have to use hot water or something along those lines. Let's just see. Yeah, because that doesn't really look. Let's try plugging this arm into the bubble blowing face, which this one just seems to be a pretty standard sort of. Yeah, no, it's pretty. Okay, I get it now. You just have to use a little bit more force, and that, of course, had the leverage. This has been sitting in there. There we go. Now it comes out on first try. What? Nonsense. Actually, I wanted to leave that arm in there. What am I doing? And then these arms go in really easily, which is very nice, I will admit. So let's take this arm out. Come on out. Come on out. There we go. Attach this arm in here. Yeah, there we go. There's a little bit of motion in that joint that I didn't really notice before, but yes, that is a thing. Then you can do that. Perhaps get, maybe this is one situation where you'd want to grab this near the base, and then have Spongebob hold the other end of the net while there is a jellyfish sitting inside, like that, and then you would just put his glasses on, and you have a very proud Mr. Squarepants here, looking very, very fitting. Of course, you also can have just, let's get this into a more catching pose, which would probably want to push this down a little bit, and then push this out, and pull this back out, like that, and then you can have him sort of la 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 la, you know, like that, with his jellyfishing net raised. His arm's probably a little bent, aggressively so, almost, to get this into a really expressive pose. It looks more so like he's just supposed to hold it like that, which makes it look like he is posing for a photo, which is definitely not out of character, that is to be sure. Now, we'll leave him back there like that, and continue looking at the rest of the hands. Let's keep that straight, mister. I think the net's interfering with the glasses a little bit, actually. Let me just stick this arm out and do that. That should help counteract that, maybe? Maybe. Maybe it'll fall and I'll look like a fool. Then you've got a couple sets of pointing fingers, if you will. Here, you have 2 of these for each hand. And you have 2 of these. Just get this out. These ones are in there real tight, so I'm having to push them out of the clamshell, which is nice. It's nice to have these things be secure, but this makes getting them out on the fly a little more difficult. Here you can see the couple of fingers that are pointing out. This is pretty similar to what he did when Patrick said, maybe it's the way you look. You know, the sans thing, and then he hit him with the nah. These hands, I'd say, are fairly interchangeable. I think including both wasn't necessary, but they're just fairly standard, and I believe these would just be removed by pulling the hand itself out, which I haven't attempted, but I think it's pretty similar. Yeah, you just pull that out, you can see it, and then you just go clunk that in without too much issue. Like that, and then he can point at a jellyfish he sees while getting ready to go hunt it, if you will. Eat it, as Plankton would say. So with that, we've pretty much got his jellyfishing attire on right now. Let's get a look at that second head, though. So I haven't removed the head, but I presume it's pretty similar to just the arms. As you can see up there, there's just the joint. I'm going to try and rock this out. Let's take the glasses off. I don't want to ruin those. See if we can't just wiggle this out. Sometimes Super 7 does not have the most clear ways of removing things. I will admit that, or the easiest way of reattaching them. I don't want to break him, of course, but I need to get this head on there for the video. So let's just keep at it for a second. Come on, Mr. Squarepants. I have to dunk him in hot water, which I didn't really want to do, but if I must, then I will. Remember, that is a way to get joints off of tough sockets, is to dunk them in hot water. This guy is so big, though, I'm not sure exactly how I would do that. It would take forever for the heat to actually get to that joint. Perhaps I'll just have to hit it with a hairdryer. Let me take this accessory off, this jellyfishing net off, and I will be back when I get this guy bisected, Frieza style. With a tiny bit of heating, I was able to get that off. Just hit it with a hairdryer. That's how I did it. Again, not the greatest. This is a very big ball joint, so it probably created a bit of a suction effect that made this very hard to remove, but there you can see, standard sort of joint connection. Let's put on Mr. Squarepants' bubble-blowing baby head. And that popped in very simply. And then what you can do is grab your bubble-blowing arm, put that in this socket, which comes empty, which is handy enough for an alternate sort of... Saying head is strange because it's so big, but I suppose that's what it is, an alternate head or faceplate, if you would. Come on, this arm's a little tougher to get in just because it's a stranger shape. And then twist that out and twist this arm around like so. push that in. Not perfect, I'll admit. This hand lacks any wrist articulation, which it could really use. But if you set up with a sort of perspective going on, it looks fine enough, and you can get it. It just takes some finagling, maybe a bit of rotating of the arm. There you can see, he's blowing a bubble. And then let's grab perhaps his, well, this arm's on the currently bisected head. Let's remove that. Boom. And give me this hand. We'll remove this gripping hand. Boom. And put that on there. I will say it is a bit of a shame how tough it was to remove the head, given how easy it is to remove the hands and put them back on. Much easier than something like an SH Figure Arts, at the very least. And then you have this arm, which you will then not get in on the first try. And just pop that in there. There you go. You want to wait for that Oh, wow. Okay, I guess I didn't get that in. I will admit, Super 7, I do really quite like their Godzilla figures, but they definitely do have... They're almost a sort of a step down from something like Figure Arts, at least in my opinion, on how easy it is to swap their parts or how well they hold together. But also they're cheaper, so that that's part of the thing. Their Godzilla figures are significantly cheaper than SH Monster Arts, for example. So this arm doesn't line up perfectly, but here you can get the general idea. He's blowing a bubble. He's got his bubble soap there. Gary nearby. You can have a Bubble Buddy. Maybe he's blowing out Bubble Jr. from that episode. And with that, we've covered pretty much everything. I didn't put all the hands in, but I don't think that's necessary. I think you guys get the gist. Anyways, how would I rate this figure? Now, I'm a big Spongebob fan, so that's obviously going to play a part in this, right? Spongebob is very important to me personally, just due to how much it played a role in my sense of humor and everything like that. Not a unique thing, as you all know. I'm sure many of you watch and enjoy SpongeBob as well. But looking at this as a figure, I'd probably place it around a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. Now, I think the design's quite faithful. It does have some of the sort of Super 7 idiosyncrasies, if you will. It scuffs relatively easily. There's definitely some paint spillover in certain areas. Where the paint is applied nice, it is nice and clear. There's definitely some issues like this arm. Look at that. That doesn't line up in the slightest. You'll have to do a lot of trickery to get that to stand there, because obviously once you let go, it will slowly drift back. This arm, in general, probably would have been better off as just a bendy wire or something like that, but it is just rigid, or a slightly flexible plastic. But I'm probably going to lean towards more of a 7. The reason is, even though there's definitely some limitations with SpongeBob, mainly just on his design, you can't really beat this value. You get SpongeBob himself, 2 heads. You get Gary, who's, a core character. You get Bubble Buddy, who's a fan favorite, even though he's only been in, I believe, 3 episodes. You get Gary's food bowl, you get multiple arms, you get the jellyfish right here, you get his jellyfishing net. This is all you would really need and all you could really get in a posable SpongeBob. But the question comes to me then, if you aren't going to do more of SpongeBob's sort of insane looks, is it really worth being posable for all the downsides that come with it, such as, visible joints, overall less stability, and sometimes some difficulties, for example, removing this head. Let's see if that I applied still works. Nope, I'll need to hit that with not the heat gun. Do not use a heat gun. Use a hairdryer. Have to hit that with the hairdryer again. But overall, the value here is hard to beat. I believe I got this for $65 in Japan. So about, I think it was 7,000 yen or so. Something along those lines. 7,700 yen. I don't know. And for the value, it's pretty hard to argue against. In terms of SpongeBob collectibles, this is probably pretty far up there. Just because, well, SpongeBob is a kids franchise. Most of their stuff is going to be targeted towards kids, and this is targeted more towards older collectors. So there is something to be said in that this probably is on the upper echelon of SpongeBob collectibles, maybe excluding those 20th anniversary statues they did a little while ago. Overall, again, I'd probably give this figure a 7. A lot of that is carried by how good the accessories are, and how solidly they nailed the design. Even if I don't think everything was an exact hit, I think the bubble blowing hand or arm is rather weak. I think the rest of it's made up. I think the hands that kind of fulfill the same purpose with these pointing hands. Wait, where's the other? Well, we seem to be missing a hand, but the hand that is on Mr. Squarepants' other arm right here, I think this, including this and this, was slightly redundant. Maybe I would have included karate hands instead, and that probably would have bumped it up to an 8. But overall, I think this figure's fine. I'm not sure if I would have gone the bubble blowing head, even though it is very iconic, maybe something a little more out there or silly, but I think this figure does its job and does it well enough to earn itself a 7, so a passing grade if we're going off of school grades. And that's pretty much all there is to cover. I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.